Hi, I'm Byron Carmean. I'm a tree guy, and I'm going to take you on a tour of Crump's Mill Pond to look at trees here at this early spring as things are just now coming out. We have a variety of species that we can see here from the lake, from the canoes and kayaks. I hope you will join us on this trip. Kind of in between a very unusual landform here. We're right next to the Suffolk Scarp. How many of you heard of the Suffolk Scarp?
Hey,
you know, when you drive down Route 10, you look to the left, it's like a mountain on the left. And that's part of the Suffolk Scarp, and it runs all the way down south, goes right on the western edge of Dismal Swamp, along White Marsh and Desert Roads. And it represents an old shoreline. In other words, Suffolk used to be Virginia Beach, and the ocean was right up to this area here. And that's the reason why Lone Star Lakes was dug out for the fossil shells that it contained over the years. The Lone Star Industries, I think, made the cement out of that limestone. Essentially, it's just shells of basically limestone. And so anyway, that makes for a rather interesting habitat here. What we're in right now is the headwaters of Chuckatuck Creek, which is, they dammed up here at the road and formed this field. I don't know exactly the history of it. It goes back a long way for sure. But the predominant tree that you see here are ball cypress. And ball cypress are a conifer, and most conifers are evergreen. However, this particular conifer is not. It is a deciduous conifer, which makes it kind of unusual. You know, there are a few others like larch, which is, or even dawn redwood, which we plant in yards, that are deciduous conifers. But most conifers, like pines and spruce and fir and that sort of thing, are all evergreen. These lose their needles in the fall, just like other deciduous trees, and remain bare during the wintertime, and they are now just putting out those needles, light green needles that you see. And you also see some brown things hanging off of them. Anybody know what those brown things are?
Keisha knows.
Don't all speak at once.
Assuming they're seeds.
Well, you know, a lot of trees have flowers, and some flowers have the male and female together, but in the case of conifers, they have the male and the female on the same tree, but they're separate. And so those brown things that you see hanging there are the male catkins, and they produce pollen. The cones of a ball cypress are round, not very large, marble size, maybe a little bigger than a marble sometimes, and they'll be on later. There might be some residuals hanging on from last year somewhere, but anyway, that's what you're seeing, and that's why, of course, in the spring we have pollen in the air coming from various trees, such as cypress, though I've never heard of cypress being one to cause a lot of allergy issues. What's this red thing here? This is a quiz because I just showed it to you over there.
That'd be a maple, I'm guessing.
That's a maple, and it's the red maple. The red maple is the most common maple that we have in this area, or in Virginia for that matter. But we do have other maples around here. There's one called the Southern Sugar Maple. Yeah, there's old Blue.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's doing all kinds of weird maneuvers there, isn't he?
Wow, I've never seen
No, it
do
is a
that.
little unusual. And what you're seeing red are not the flowers, but the fruit.
Yeah.
Hanging there.
The fruit?
Yeah, that's
On
the
the
fruit. Also, one little thing to point out, this little, maybe somewhat tree related, all right, but if you look at this ball cypress right in here, you'll see those bright patches.
Yeah.
Do you see those bright patches on the bark?
Yeah.
That's done by flying squirrels.
Huh.
Flying squirrels are squirrels that you never see because they're nocturnal.
Yes, they are.
They stay out at night. They're the night shift. Those things you see, those bushy-tailed rats that you see running around your yard, those, of course, are diurnal, or they hang out in the daytime. But these guys are nighttime things. And it's my understanding that they strip the bark from cypress trees and shred it up and use it for nesting material.
Yep.
And you often will see that on ball cypress in swamps and places where ball cypress grows.
Then you see
Yeah, I see another one over here that's displaying that. And by the way, flying squirrels don't fly, but they do glide. So,
And they're very cute.
interesting little thing about Merchant's Mill Pond is they have alligators.
Yep. Nope. Not paddling it.
And they're interesting to paddle with. They don't bother you. And I remember in there in February one time, but it was a really warm spell, and there was an alligator like right there. He raised up, and he was right at the surface of the water, and when he saw us, he just settled right down in the water and disappeared in the depths.
Oh no.
But there's some, I think there's one in there that's around 9 or 10 feet. The rest are a little smaller than that. But nobody knows for sure how they got there. There are some in Alligator River Wildlife Refuge, which is a little further south and across the Sound.
Yeah.
But it's kind of questionable whether they crossed the Sound and went all the way up Bennett's Creek to get to the mill pond. So I don't know. But it's an interesting place to go if you ever want to go, and you don't have to worry about the gators. They're not going to eat you. Is typical of the birch family, but it is not a birch. It is a hornbeam. And it's typically, the book would call it, and I think it would be in your book, American hornbeam.
American hornbeam.
Yeah, and it's also called ironwood.
Ironwood. That's what. Okay.
And, you know, supposedly it has very hard wood, but it has an interesting trunk because the trunk looks like mussels. It's kind of fluted, but yet smooth.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best place to put a septic tank or something because it's really, really wet and poorly drained, and most of Chesapeake was that way.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an indicator plant.
I didn't know that was native.
Yes. In fact, there are two species of them. We have one called Arundinaria tecta, and then there's one here's a bunch of it over here.
Yeah.
Then there's one in the mountains called Arundinaria gigantea. Needless to say, you can't see the leaves very well, but I just happened to bring a white oak leaf. And that's what a white oak looks like. Okay, now, white oaks have deep lobes in their leaves, and they don't have any points on their leaves. That might look like a point, but it's kind of rounded, okay? So if it's a white oak, it has rounded lobes. Now this is another white oak. White oak, by the way, is a family, but it's also a tree. This is a white oak tree, but it's in the white oak family. And this is another white oak, and it's called post oak. And it also has rounded lobes. It doesn't have as deep a sinuses or as many sinuses and lobes. So how does a red oak look different? This is a red oak, one of the red oaks. And notice it has bristles, pointed tips. And so that turns out to be a southern red oak. And if you look at the base of it, it looks like a bell. It's kind of shaped like a bell. And then there's another red oak that I brought called a black oak. Oaks all have the same genus. Anybody have any idea how many different oaks there are in Virginia?
No.
Just a ballpark?
10.
Well, actually, I think it's around 27 species of oaks. And black oak is one of the red oaks, you know. But they have tips, points on the ends of the leaves. And there are some red oaks that have just one tip. Like, if I can keep up with it, this little guy.
This one.
Now, this one has just one tip, but it's a tip, which puts it in the red oak group. This one is called Darlington Oak, which is Quercus Hemispherica. And it's not a common oak around here, but it is native here. Leaves coming out of the top. This is one of the largest species that we have in Virginia. In fact, the tallest tree on the East Coast is one of these. It's a tulip poplar. As we walk around outside in the spring and see all the beautiful trees, we don't really appreciate all that they do for us. If you look at this particular red bud here, it's in full bloom, and obviously it has a lot of attractive features. It's one of our native trees. But it produces oxygen for us to breathe. It takes in the carbon dioxide to help alleviate climate change. And it has so many other amenities, like the roots hold the soil, especially on a slope such as we have here, preventing erosion. It provides places for birds and other animals for their nest cavities or nesting activities. And of course they produce fruits, which we can, some of us actually can eat, and if not us, certainly the wildlife uses it for their food. We also have some trees that are here from other places, other countries, that are invasives and really are more harmful than helpful to our environment. And so those are ones that we need to try to eliminate as much as possible. Not to mention that trees provide us with the lumber that we use for building our houses and structures and that sort of thing. This is one of the trees that we've been seeing along the way. I hope you've enjoyed the trip. This is a ball cypress, which is a common tree along wet areas along this Bennett's Creek. I hope you enjoyed the tour and hope that you will join us on future tours as we explore surprising Suffolk.